The Great Marsh Trail in the Indiana Dunes National Park offers an up-close look at a critical habitat for an array of plant life, as well as countless migrating birds and waterfowl. But this unique location is also a powerful reminder of the region's history and a symbol of nature's resilience. Thanks to the collaborative efforts of volunteers, environmental organizations, and the National Park Service, visitors to the Great Marsh Trail can see a landscape far different from the one that would have greeted them a mere 25 years ago. Today, the marsh reminds us of the powerful forces that shaped the Indiana Dunes thousands of years ago.
When you come here to visit the Great Marsh, there's a number of opportunities that you'll have to be able to really get the full experience. One mainly being our 1.2-mile trail. We also have a fully accessible overlook, which we're standing on right now, that can be accessed from a small parking lot right off of Broadway Street. You can also just take Beverly Drive and just hop out your car and take a good look of what the Great Marsh has to offer. Also, another way to get a great view of the Great Marsh, you can access it from the Dune Ridge Trail, which is just northeast of here. Eventually, when you get to the south side of the trail, you will be at the beginning of that Dune Ridge, where will get an overview of the entire Great Marsh system. The Great Marsh is actually the largest interdunal wetland of the Lake Michigan watershed. This interdunal wetland formation began approximately 6,500 years ago. In the early stages of the Tolston Dune beach line, that dune ridge was fairly minuscule and water was able to easily overpass those sand dunes with the assistance of storm, wave, and wind energy. Over the course of an additional 2,000 years, that beach line would be able to grow to a substantial height that did not allow for the access of water over that beach line, which would eventually completely isolate the Great Marsh from the rest of Lake Michigan.
But as powerful as the wind, waves, and sand were in forming the landscape, the changes brought by human settlers were far more rapid and dramatic. For newcomers to the area, the wetlands offered agricultural and development opportunities, but only once the abundant waters were tamed.
Fast forward to the early 1900s, with the migration of Euro-American settlers into the Midwest, they would eventually stumble upon the Great Marsh. They didn't see that there was a whole lot of use for such large wetlands.
There was a fellow named Chauncey Blair. At that time, there was a shallow lake within the Great Marsh referred to as Fish Lake. He manipulated the water and grew cranberries. In 1927, Frederick Bartlett Company purchased 2,000 acres.
The Great Marsh was then drained and replaced with an abundance of agricultural and residential lands.
But by the end of the 20th century, the critical importance of the wetlands was apparent. Wetlands not only provided crucial habitat for plants and animals, but they helped control flooding and improve water quality.
But it wasn't until 1998 when the National Park Service partnered with several outside organizations, began restoration work of the Great Marsh to reestablish this very unique ecosystem that we have here with us now.
When I first came here, humans had drained a lot of it. There were attempts, for example, to farm some of these wetlands. This open expanse of water wasn't here before. So the Great Marsh, it goes pretty much from Michigan City all the way to Gary, at least historically.
You could get in a canoe in Gary and go all the way past Michigan City and never get out of the canoe. That's how large this marsh was.
What we're seeing right here in the Great Marsh is one of the better restoration success stories in our area here.
The resource management team, along with a lot of our park partners, a lot of money's gone into a lot of time and energy, and we try to restore, like in this case, the hydrology, get more wetlands back where they naturally were.
Of course, restoring an area like the Great Marsh to its natural state takes a lot more than simply stopping development. The Park Service and its partners have worked hard to manage the flow of water in the area, and they have cultivated native species of plants to help stabilize and restore the soil.
We developed a spillway structure that would facilitate holding water to the south.
That's really helped to retain water that used to flow out to the lake.
Lake Michigan receives less pollution. We've documented a reduction in E. coli.
A lot of this has been due to the work that the Park Service has done to change the flow of water. They established a small dam that's really helped to retain water that used to flow out to the lake. There are also some significant areas of the Great Marsh where the Park Service has reestablished native plant populations in areas that were before this more or less one large clone or one large swath of either certain types of cattails or Phragmites. You now have a Great Marsh that is, in a better place than it was 30 years ago.
So there's been a lot of plants that are considered to be state threatened that have greatly benefited from the reintroduction of the habitat type that they need. One example is the small forget-me-not, and when we first started, there was maybe 1 or 2 small populations of it. Now it is very prolific.
If you are interested in checking out some of the diverse plant life that we have here at the Great Marsh, just right off of the main parking lot where you can access the Great Marsh Trail, and you'll find plant species there such as butterfly weed, which is used as an energy source by monarchs, and common milkweed. The Great Marsh is a very unique ecosystem, not only for the plant diversity that you'll find here, but we also have a large abundance of avian species.
Thanks to the successful restoration of the Great Marsh, the wetlands here now host an astonishing variety of birds, making the location a must-see for birdwatchers.
So we're at a trail in the Indiana Dunes National Park called the Great Marsh Trail, located in Beverly Shores, and it's one of the hot spots that you have for birding for not only resident birds but migratory birds because of the diversity of habitats that are here. So we have open cattail marshes, we have more swampy edges. There's so many birds that depend on water. Something like 3 out of 4 birds need this type of habitat.
Wetlands are so important. They provide so many ecosystem services and they are crucial for certain organisms.
The wetlands are really focal points of life, right? They're the meeting places of 2 different habitats. It's kind of the meeting place of the aquatic world and the meeting place of the land world. So you have a lot of biodiversity.
We've seen over 370 bird species in the Indiana Dunes. So of that 370 species, about 120 will actually nest here. Of those, roughly 60, 70 of them are year-round residents, things such as our cardinals and blue jays and a lot of our woodpeckers.
With the great inland sea of Lake Michigan just over the Dune Ridge, the Great Marsh is an important destination for migrating birds. Here, these feathered travelers can rest or linger before resuming their journey.
But a lot of birds are coming up from anywhere from the southern U.S. All the way from Central and South America. We have these neotropical birds that have chosen to spend their summers here. See things from out west that wander in like Townsend solitaires. They might come in from farther north, such as snowy owls. Evening grosbeak is definitely a highly sought after bird that lives farther north, but whenever they do show up every couple of years in these little invasions based on food supply, this is one of the best spots they go to look for them. It's an assemblage of birds that you would not see any other place, and we have more bird species than even places like the Everglades in Florida or even areas of Texas. Some of the staples that people really like to see are the warblers. 36 species of warblers regularly migrate or nest here. Bald eagles flying by, osprey that are increasing in the area, even our everyday red-shouldered hawks here in the Great Marsh Trail that sit right there by the roadside. Those are sightings that just really make people drop their jaws, and it creates what we call a spark bird for folks, and it really propels this interest in birds.
In restoring the Great Marsh, the National Park Service has also ensured the site is welcoming to human visitors as well.
So much of the habitats here can be pretty inaccessible as you have a lot of this wet, mucky soils, but through some of the accessibility on some of these national park trails, areas like this boardwalk overlook allow for not only hiking around and seeing birds, but we can kind of camp out at a spot and just kind of watch as the birds come to us. If you really want to get into it and see things such as a lot of these grebes and ducks and herons that are out here, you need a spotting scope. And a spotting scope gives you a little extra stability and longer distance and reach with the zoom. A lot of great blue herons today. You see a great egret out here, kind of slowly wading in the water, and not too far away we have these blue-winged teal, which we're not nesting here in the dunes, at least not in any significant numbers. So to see 100 of them shows that they're clearly migrating through. Bird watchers are definitely a big influence in the bird research and the bird data that we're able to collect. Today a lot of people use what's called ebird.com to submit their sightings. And by submitting whether they see a bald eagle or a tufted titmouse, that goes into this database. And not just scientists, but anyone can look up those sightings. We're looking at these secretive marsh birds that are really hard to study. Things like Virginia rails and soras and gallinules, that you don't see them, you maybe only hear them. And so we're doing surveys, trying to figure out where they are, what numbers that we have here. And then we're looking at the actual habitat. We're looking at the plants. What's growing in there? Is it all cattails? Is there open water? And by looking at those conditions, then we can actually figure out what they like, and then we can make recommendations to land managers. If you want to manipulate your wetland or do restorations, here's what you might do to get these birds back into your wetlands.
Over here is amazing. You're seeing about 16 sandhill crane. And if you were here 20 years ago, there would be no crane here.
Oh, in the background here we have 3 sandhill cranes, 2 adults and 1 juvenile. The sandhill cranes in some respect are an indication of the success of restoration activities about the last 10 years, I'd say, to have been nesting here in the park that we know of.
In many ways, the Great Marsh is a success story, but the work of restoring and caring for our natural world continues, and the region and its wild inhabitants still face a number of human and environmental challenges.
Even though we have a lot of great habitat, there's still a lot of threats to birds. Habitat destruction is one of the #1 things as we see development, and that development can be both industry, it can be both residential, it can be both commercial. It comes in there. We worry a lot about pollution and its effects on birds, and not just pollution in the water, but pollution in the air.
There's still a lot of non-native plants that dominate areas of the Great Marsh.
We know from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Survey that there's roughly 40 million people in the U.S. that call themselves a birder or bird watcher. It's a fast-growing hobby, and by being a fast-growing hobby, it's also a fast-growing avenue for research and things that we can learn about birds. Birds are an animal that folks can connect to, and then by connecting to birds, you connect to other avenues of the environment. You connect to these parks. You want to volunteer, donate to these parks. Appreciating and being able to have these birds around ensures the future of these different parks and recreation sites that we enjoy.
If you want to contribute to our restoration effort, Save the Dunes with a designation for the Great Marsh restoration of the money. Shirley Hines, that a contribution to them would assist in the complete restoration of Great Marsh.
Walking the Great Marsh Trail reminds us of the astounding variety and beauty of the natural world, and just how fragile it is. We all have the power to make a difference in caring for and restoring these priceless habitats for the plants, the animals, the birds, and all who walk the trail after us. The Indiana Dunes Discovery Trail is an incredible natural treasure, and you are an important part of ensuring its future. When you visit, be sure to follow all posted signs and instructions. Visit indianadunes.com to learn about all of the volunteer opportunities and spend time caring for this fragile environment. In addition to the national and state park services, a number of nonprofit agencies work tirelessly to preserve and protect the Indiana Dunes Discovery Trail habitats. Learn more about these important agencies and support their efforts with your charitable contributions. Finally, be a champion for the Indiana Dunes. Stay informed and use your voice to tell the story of this wonderful place. Help ensure that all visitors, the magnificent birds, the migrating butterflies, and friends from around the world can enjoy the Indiana Dunes Discovery Trail for generations to come. Check out the links below to get started.